We can be found on YouTube, iTunes, and Spotify. Like, share, subscribe, and leave us a comment down below. Now, on with the show.
Okay. We'll do it live. Fucking thing. No. We'll do it live. Fuck it.
Death Holler is a horror cast created by two true horror fans to bring to the table your favorite horror films. Topics include, but are not limited to, historical horror, gore, the occult, and terror. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back, everyone, to a special presentation of Death Holler, in which we stare down the eldritch terrors and descend into chaos. I am your host, the Reverend Dr. Death, and joining me as always is my co-host and friend, LlaReyna. And if that introduction was a little too vague for you, on this episode we will be breaking down and discussing the recently wrapped Netflix teen horror series, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Chaos.
Chaos. Which sadly takes on a whole other meaning when we get to the actual show, but we'll get to that in a little bit.
Oh, sure does.
First up, LlaReyna, how about you kind of break down a little bit of what Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the origin of the character?
Oh, gladly. I am so glad to be dabbling into this. First of all, when they announced that they were going to be having a darker series, even though they have quite a bit out of Sabrina, I was just really excited. Sabrina basically first appeared in the comics Archie's Madhouse. It was, I keep wanting to say episode 22, but it's like edition 22 or just number 22.
Issue number 22.
Issue, thank you. And that was back in 1962, way before we were even itching our father's pants. So Sabrina's been around for quite a while.
Quite a while.
And she just kind of was in, I don't know, she was a reoccurring guest in quite a bit other series of the Archie comics. I think still she even has her own, which she got her own spinoff in 1971.
Yeah, it was about a decade later, but yeah, she finally got her own after being, like you said, a bit character in kind of the other stories.
Now, I first was introduced to Sabrina, I must have been 12 years old, 11, 12, maybe through the age of 15, where I was reading the Betty and Veronica comics. They had their own comic series, and every now and then there'd be like maybe a 1 to 2 page special of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And I would read it and be like, who's this bitch? Not really like that, but, it was so short. You really just didn't get a whole lot. And I knew who she was, but I don't know. I guess at the time I wasn't that intrigued at the moment. And then I also read, they used to have these little small, almost like Reader's Digest books. Small magazines, yeah. Jughead. I used to read the Jughead ones. I don't remember her being in the Reader's Digest versions of it, but definitely in the Betty and Veronica. So
yeah, I was way more familiar with the actual Archie comics myself. I mean, those were the ones I remember whenever I was a kid growing up. I remember, technically I was more into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics, but they happened to share, shelf space with the Archie comics. And that's how I kind of, knew about them. I don't know if I knew a whole lot about Sabrina at the time. I just, because Archie was the one that was primarily, in your face all the time.
Everywhere, anyway, yeah. So. I mean, everywhere you turn. And it wasn't just Archie. They had all these different versions of the Archie comics. And then, of course, our parents loved them. I don't know if yours did. Mine did. They were pretty surprised that I got into it.
Well, honestly, I don't know if my parents even read comics, but yeah, it was just kind of interesting to see. I mean, whenever I found out how far they went back, which I mean, a lot of the, Marvel comics and DC and all that went back as, to that time period as well. But it's just like Archie was a little bit different because it was more like down to earth. It was more just, I don't know, like comedy, but with teen issues, it was a different thing entirely.
Oh yeah, totally. It's funny, I read it before my teen years, so I thought that that's kind of how teen years were going to be. It was not. There was not as many. There was adventures, but nothing as fun or, I don't know, clean cut as the adventures in the Archie comics. On the topic of comics, shockingly, Sabrina was originally going to be just a one-off character. She was not intended to be as big as she became. I listened to so many different like video casts of trying to find out how she became so big. I didn't read or find anything as to why. I don't know if people were just like, give us more Sabrina, give us that teenage witch. I don't know. No idea. All I know is obviously she's blown up.
Yeah, she gained a lot of popularity for some reason. That you're exactly right. I mean, from what I've seen, it was just she was going to be there in that one issue. It was kind of just like a joke, and then she apparently a lot of people connected to it or thought it was cool, and they that's why they kept bringing her back. But I don't know if maybe it had something to do at the time period this was going on. They had just kind of banned all of the EC comics and Tales from the Crypt and all of those, and I think there was kind of like a demand, whether it was known or not, for like horror style comics. And even though she technically wasn't that, she was kind of in that mold, and I think that that might have played into it a little bit.
She had the magic. Yeah, she put a spell on everybody is what happened. So who is Sabrina? Well, if you don't know, what are you doing on this podcast, first of all? Second, she is basically a half witch, half mortal, half witch. Mom is human. And depending on what you're reading or watching will determine on what mom is doing during the time frame. And dad is a warlock or a witch or a male witch, also depending on what you're reading, watching, etc. She lives with her aunts Hilda and Zelda, which I'm sure we'll get into detail about those two lovely ladies, the Spellman aunties. She has a familiar that I'm going to want to familiarize you with, Salem Saberhagen. We'll talk a little bit more about him a little bit later, but every witch should have a familiar. In a nutshell, in the comic books and in the TV series, she was basically supposed to keep her powers a secret. And she did. She didn't talk about it, unlike in CAOS, which we'll get into that. But she mostly uses them basically to help her friends. And sometimes, just like in real life, even if you're not using magic, some of the things you do to help people don't always go the way you want them to. So a lot of it was her learning how to use her powers, to be careful how you use your powers, and what consequences are, if you don't think things through. I guess ultimately that's what you're supposed to get out of these. The friendlier versions, anyways, of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Across all media, comics, etc., she basically discovers her powers at the age of 16. For the most part, you can tell she has a Halloween birthday. So, I mean, that's just basic. That's
a neat little thing they added in there. I mean, it just fits the character and what they're trying to go with. Neat little campy thing that they added in.
Oh yeah. So I'm going to briefly go through some of the media because I know we're going to talk a lot about some of the things. I know we're going to stick primarily to CAOS, but so obviously we talked about the comics. There was an animated series in the 1970s titled Sabrina the Teenage Witch. I mean, it doesn't get any more basic than that. And you can pretty much rest assured if you watched any of them. I know I did on the Cartoon Network. I think that's what was playing the classics back in the day. I'm pretty sure it was the Cartoon Network. It was basically what you would see in the comics. So nothing special there. Then, of course, do I even want to mention the Attack of the Bees movie or say it's Attack of the Bees? Because I can delete that out. But our Attack of the Bees movie, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, it was a 1996 film. I'm not even going to give any details on that.
Yeah, there'll be enough detail about that here in a few minutes.
In just a few minutes, yes. And then there was the series, which was, I believe, in 1996. I did not write it down.
Yeah, that's, I believe, when it started.
Yes, and boy, did I love that series. That ran for 7 seasons. Pretty good for back in its day, and pretty good for following a teenage girl. Seriously. I don't think it even ended with her graduating from high school.
I don't know that it did, but it was, it definitely, was part of the culture because, everybody at that time knew about it. It's one of those, it's just one of those things that I mean, especially, we'll get into it later, but I mean, if you grew up with Melissa Joan Hart, as Clarissa explains it all,
Yep.
and then, I mean, it was one of those shows, it's like, well, I got to check out and see what she's in now, and, that's kind of, I think what kind of helped build it up a little bit.
Holds up pretty good. Now, I will go back to the series in just a moment, because Sabrina had an animated series, again, after it was based off of the Sabrina the Teenage Witch series from 1996. And the animated series also had Melissa Joan Hart in it, but she played the ants in the animated series, I believe.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
I think I remember seeing that a little bit. I mean, it wasn't anything that I watched, but I remember the animation was dramatically better than the one in the 70s. So
Yeah. Now, I will throw out there is, if you have Pluto TV, which anybody can have that, it's free. There's apps for it. There is a channel called After School Cartoons where you can actually watch Sabrina the animated series. And I only know this because my kids love that channel. They have Tales from the Crypt, the animated series, which is not near as scary, obviously, as the original, but I think it holds up pretty good. It keeps my kids interested. And my kids, they love pure horror. So it keeps their interest. It's got to be pretty good. And then my son in particular likes Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, the animated series. And so they kind of watched me watch CAOS, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Obviously, I didn't let them watch it with me, but they saw me really into it. They found out it was Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Son got excited. And I said, hey, let me introduce you to this series, which is on Hulu. It's Sabrina the Teenage Witch, the series. So they've actually been watching that. We're almost done with season 1. And, the comedy is still there. It holds up pretty well.
That's good. I mean, it's one of those classic sitcoms. I mean, if I remember right, it's still got the laugh track and all that stuff, kind of the holdover,
yes,
sitcom.
It does. And I mean, we don't even hear the laugh track because we're the ones laughing with it. So
that's good.
Yeah, so we've been thoroughly enjoying that. Now, before we get to CAOS, there's one more thing that I wanted to mention. And if you look on the Wikipedia page and you're reading about the history of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, they do mention Riverdale. And I know they were going to have her on that, but one of the creators or writers, I'm not 100 on that information right now, pulled out of it at the last minute and said, no, we don't want to take away from the story. Now, it's not said in there, but what I'm thinking is that they pulled her out of Riverdale because I think they started getting into the talks, if not already creating Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And I really do believe down into my deep black soul that if they had her or a character portraying her on Riverdale, it really would have taken away from, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix or vice versa. So I'm kind of glad they didn't do that.
Well, and I think at the time they also said that there wasn't room for her in the sense that it didn't fit as far as the theme goes. And I'll discuss that a little bit later, right before we get into that. But it would have been kind of a different feel because Riverdale was specifically, at least when it started, was a kind of a Twin Peaks knockoff type show. It was, but in a good way. I actually liked the first season of it. It was, kind of a murder mystery, who killed Jason Blossom, that sort of thing. But it didn't. It had horror elements to it, but they just dabbled in them. There wasn't any outright, supernatural anything. It was kind of hinted at, but not really, overtly there. It was kind of in people's minds more than it was anything else.
Yeah. And so now that Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is over, technically, there is a lot of talk of, maybe somebody else picking up the series and taking off. And I do see holes where they're available to do that and maybe, continue versus just ending how it ended. And I know we'll get to that. But, I mean, I see a lot of hints about possible a Riverdale crossover. It worries me a little bit, but at the same time, the way things ended, at this point will probably take a little bit more just to get more at this point. So that's how I personally feel. Yeah, on that. So I mentioned multiple times to you, I'm pretty sure you're probably sick and tired of me talking about Salem. I'm never going to stop talking about my love for Salem. Everybody deserves a familiar. You really do. Do you want me to get into the familiars now, or I don't see any better opening to talk about Salem because we're going to get into the Attack of the Bees.
Yeah, we're going to get into Attack of the Bees and a little bit of discussion about the comic series that actually led into CAOS. So yeah, go ahead and discuss a little bit about Salem before we get into all of that.
All right, so we'll keep this short because my love, it shows so hard. I love Salem. I loved talking Salem. I even loved the cute, not cute, but, the sinister, quiet CAOS Saber. The familiar black cat. I just love his name. Thought it was the most brilliant thing. Even though I know Salem existed in the comics, I'm telling you, when I read the Betty and Veronica comics, I really didn't get a lot of details. I don't think Salem was present, even though he was in the older comics, had I actually read the Sabrina comics. Salem, believe it or not, with his own Wikipedia page, is an American short-haired domesticated cat. Which he's not domesticated. He just has to be, technically, because he's serving basically a prison sentence.
Yeah.
And he lives with Sabrina. Now, not a lot of people mention that he's her familiar. I think that kind of comes to terms in CAOS more than anything else. But ultimately, Salem was a witch, and he got in trouble by the Witches' Council, and he was sentenced to 100 years as a cat, and that was for punishment for basically attempting world domination. I find that to be very hilarious because I think we all know good goddamn well that any cat, given the opportunity, would try to rule the world.
Oh, exactly.
Try to eat their owners. I mean,
anybody with access to the internet should know that. I mean, there's a whole video out there called, I think it was actually something they made fun of on Robot Chicken. It was like a little thing they did where it was like cats are jerks, and it's just like cats going around trying to kill people inadvertently, causing them to trip downstairs and all this other stuff. I totally see cats, trying to take over the world. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah. So Salem really didn't talk a whole lot, although I know in the original comics, allegedly, and it really depends on the story, he did have some limited powers, incantations per se. But in the show, he required, I know for anything to happen, he required basically Sabrina's magic finger to kind of put to use his power or to make what he wanted come to life, per se. So, yeah. And then in the show and kind of in the animated series, he basically serves as her babysitter. I don't know any better way to explain it. They're always saying, watch Sabrina, help Sabrina, do this, do that. Whereas in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, he is legitimately her familiar. He knows when she's in trouble, knows when she needs help. And he was described as basically being her, he's basically her conscience. So you can tell in certain scenes when he's there where she starts to question herself and she's saying, of course this is the right thing to do. Why wouldn't it be? You can tell he's emitting that feeling to her, like, are you sure you're making the right decision? And trying to make her kind of do it on her own, but at the same time give her the sense like, hey, give her some kind of direction.
Kind of like her dark Jiminy Cricket or something to that effect.
Exactly. So the only thing I have to say is, in conclusion of my short Salem, discussion, is that love how he talks in the animated series and in the series. Was very sad he didn't talk. Even if he had the voice of Lucifer in CAOS, I would have loved it if he was a little evil motherfucker. He only spoke one time to her, probably through her mind.
It would have still been so much better. I mean, the voice they used that one little time was just, it was such a tease. I mean, I really was I cannot wait to hear, and then we just never did. So
I loved it. I mean, I was like, oh my God, he's going to be such a little badass. And granted, he was. I wanted him to talk a little. So anyways, moving forward, let's go on.
There's a lot of people that whenever the CAOS came out, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, they were like, where the hell did this come from? What, all they had been exposed to primarily was the Melissa Joan Hart TV show. And, it was so kind of goofy and, the laughs and the comedy and everything. And this show comes out and it's so dark and it's got all these like satanic themes. And they're like, where the hell did this come from? But a lot of people don't realize it's actually a new series of Archie horror comics that came out in like 2013 is what the basis of this was. There's several issue titles in this series they've got now. They've got Jughead the Hunger, which is basically Jughead is like a werewolf. They got Vampironica, of course. You know, she's I mean, it's literally like she's dressed like a vampire or something like that, and she, you know, it's
that's exactly what I thought when I saw that.
There's a little mini series they came out with called Blossom 666, which is the two Blossom twins trying to outcompete each other to become the new, basically, Antichrist. And
okay, Blossom twins. Hold on. I know there was a Cheryl Blossom. Was there another Blossom?
Yeah, Jason.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so those are the newer ones in the series, but it actually began with a title called Afterlife with Archie, which is a play on the title Life with Archie, which was a long-standing comic in the Archie series. It was basically just Archie's life, and I think they even had like a final book in that series where they actually killed Archie off, but it was... Well, they kind of killed him off, but then they kind of gave him another spin where he could have like lived with either Betty or Veronica, and it just it was one of those. But they came out with a title Afterlife with Archie, which is basically a zombie comic. It was in the style of Sam Raimi's, you know, Evil Dead series, you know, a lot of blood and guts and gore. And the primary character in that series that started the whole thing is Sabrina, because at the beginning of the comic, Jughead has his dog that he's loved for years, Hot Dog. His dog gets run over by Reggie, one of the other characters in Archie comics, and
Reggie,
such an asshole. But he gets run over, and like Jughead's just distraught, and he knows that Sabrina has magical powers, so he takes Hot Dog to Sabrina, and she gets the Necronomicon out. She reads from, a little bit of a necromancy spell, brings Hot Dog back, but just kind of like in Pet Sematary, he doesn't come back the right way. And whenever he starts attacking people, he spreads the zombie virus or plague to them. And,
shit.
And so the whole series is basically like you're watching all these, Archie comic characters basically getting killed off left and right. And having to fight like back zombie hordes and all that stuff. So that's where they brought her into it in that. And in the sixth issue of the series, they centered the whole issue around Sabrina, and they got such positive feedback from having her in that they decided they would spin her out into her own series. So I
think they did a good job. That was a good choice.
Yeah, and they wanted something completely different. It was in 2014. Roberto Aguirre Sacasa, I guess that's how you say his name. You maybe have a better interpretation of that than I would, but he was the writer for it. He was also the one that I think came up with Afterlife with Archie, and he teamed up with Robert Hack as the artist to come up with a series that was basically, they titled the series Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is actually based on a 1972 horror anthology series called Chilling Adventures in Sorcery, as told by Sabrina. And yes, that is a huge long title. I don't know.
Yeah, I was about to say, Jesus with the names over here, man.
They eventually dropped Sabrina out of that on the original series and just called it Chilling Adventures in Sorcery. But, I mean, it was like a serious horror anthology that was basically told by Sabrina. It was like she was telling like these scary stories, to whoever the audience was that was, at the time. And so they based the name on that, but they based the series on the fact that she was created in the 60s. A movie that we're getting ready to discuss called Rosemary's Baby came out at the same time, and along with some of the other movies that they kind of based this on was The Omen, The Exorcist, of course Arthur Miller's The Crucible. They kind of got all this inspiration, and they wanted like just this satanic type story set, and they just set it in the 60s to kind of commemorate both Sabrina's creation during that time period and how it tied into Rosemary's Baby. And the actual comic book itself has several Rosemary's Baby type, inspirations in there. There's allusions all over the place. The way Sabrina's mother is basically she's trying to escape with Sabrina. She knows that there's all these dark things going on with Edward, her husband, and his sisters. So she tries to get Sabrina out of there and ends up getting caught. And I mean, that's another thing about the series in the comics that's different than the actual Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the TV show. They went way dark in this comic. Like, Edward is right off the bat is a bastard. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because what he does when he catches up to Sabrina's mom is he basically drives her insane with a spell, and then he takes her to Dr. Saperstein, which is actually a character in Rosemary's Baby. That's one of the first things they tie into it, but directly. But he takes her there and has her basically lobotomized, and leaves her there, just babbling and drooling and just kind of a mess, and then leaves with to give the baby to his two sisters to kind of take care of, which they get into that a little bit later too. I think he intended to raise Sabrina himself, but then that's another dark thing in the comics. Like, the witches all gang up together, they banish him to hell, and then that's whenever they give the Sabrina over to the two sisters.
Which is weird, banishing a witch or a warlock to hell, because ultimately they are worshiping the Dark Lord, and you think that they're going to go there anyways. Yeah. I just find that to be very ironic.
Well, the way they did it in the comic, it was kind of interesting. I don't know if he was completely in hell, because the way they showed it, he was this lone, like, dead-looking tree that was out in the middle of a field, not far or into that's outside the woods of where they lived at. And I think it was Westbridge was the name of the Massachusetts town that they came from originally. But he was basically his agony, his face was like this frozen bit of agony that was like imprinted in this tree. So I don't know if they turned him into the tree and that's where he was kept, or if his soul was in hell. They kind of don't really, it's kind of fuzzy. Yeah. But anyways, the other thing that they did do that kind of ties into Rosemary's Baby a little bit later on is that Madam Satan, when she's brought into it, she tries to get close to Sabrina, because the way that they do it in the comic, it's different than the TV show, and I think I might actually like the TV show or the Netflix show better. They had in the comics that she was actually like an ex-lover to Edward, and she was with him at the time that he made the decision he would get with Diana, or I think that was her name, but anyways, Sabrina's mortal mother, and when she heard that he was leaving her for a mortal, she went all ballistic. They were at a zoo at the time. She throws herself literally in the lion's den and gets ripped apart, like, by the lions, which I guess has like a biblical type, connotation to it. But she's sent to Gehenna, which is supposed to be like the circle of hell, according to the comics, that if you're suicidal or if you commit suicide, that's where you're cast to. And she somehow she's summoned back, actually, and this is kind of interesting, by two witches from Riverdale, and you can guess which two witches from Riverdale they might be.
I wonder.
A brunette and a blonde that are trying to summon a succubus to kind of win a bet to get so that they can get this redheaded guy. So you can kind of guess who those two people are. But anyways, she's summoned back to Earth by them, and she's basically just out for blood. She wants to kill anybody and everybody that's associated with her downfall, and she blames Edward. She blames Sabrina's mom, which, Sabrina's mom's so out of it anyways that there's really no benefit for her trying to go after her. So when she finds out that they had a child together, that's who she wants to ruin. That's kind of like, so in the comics, she takes over. There's the teacher who's like their drama teacher, Miss Gardenia, ends up sadly coming across Madam Satan. Madam Satan realizes that's the perfect way for her to get into Sabrina's life. She puts her into a coma, which is very similar to a character we're going to discuss in Rosemary's Baby. And basically, she's in a coma until she basically passes away, and then Madam Satan takes over. As far as the rest of the things that are darker in the books, the ants are confirmed cannibals. The reason they specifically chose the house they did across from the cemetery is so they would have fresh meat, and they constantly eat people. I mean, there is no ifs, ands, or buts. And the other thing is, all the witches in the show are shown to be just ghastly hags. Like sagging breasts, like bestial looking bodies whenever they're not made up to look like humans. Their faces are half rotted. I mean, they're horrific. Harvey's killed in the comics. I mean, and then of course eaten by all the members of the coven, so that there's no body for anybody to find. He's later resurrected by a spell that Madam Satan comes up with, and Edward hops his way back into the world through that, and ends up trying to almost molest and commit rape to his own daughter, which is a whole separate crazy thing that they do in the comics. I do have to.
What the heaven?
It's like I said, for people to be so freaked out about the show being as dark as it is, they really don't know anything about the source material. The other thing, the big thing about the comics that I thought was great was that the art by Robert Hack is amazing. It's like this soft pencil line work that they do. He does like the only colors that are really in the stories are like these browns and oranges. Gives like this October autumn vibe to it. It's almost like a faded Polaroid, like a sun faded Polaroid. How it gets those like browns and oranges on it. He does a real good job of that. It gives it like that old feel. And, of course, it being set into the, 60s, it's got a lot of differences as far as, like, its references. I mean, like Sabrina's, like, reading Truman Capote's In Cold Blood in one scene. Anne Margaret, she's hanging out with her by a pool, and, Anne Margaret's revealed to be, the actress is revealed to be a witch as well. And then Harvey Kinkle is drawn to resemble Steve McQueen, which I thought was very interesting because he kind of goes back and forth in the comics. He's either the hunk or he's the nerd. Like, he's never in between. And like in this one, he's just like, the All-American football player, Steve McQueen looking guy. Yeah. But it's just, and it's just there's a lot of differences too in some of the characters they did in the show, because like Roz in the comics is just like this redheaded, basically she's just a horrible person. Like, she's the antagonist to Sabrina the whole time. Like in the show, she's one of Sabrina's best friends, but Rosalind in this is basically her Cheryl Blossom, the one person that's always competing with her for Harvey. She's always giving her shit over everything. And the TV show, we'll get into it a little bit later, but I feel like TV show was set more in like an 80s style setting too. I got that vibe a lot. I don't know if it was meant to be, but that's the vibe I got from the show.
Which TV series? Are you talking about CAOS, or are you talking about
CAOS.
The teenage?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And if I'm gonna say 80s, I'm gonna say early 80s, because it still even had almost like 70 vibes to it with some of the costumes that they wore. Not costumes, but some of their outfits that they wore.
Yeah, their outfits were dated, like you said. All their movies they watched were like 80s classics. Like every time Sabrina wanted to go to the local movie theater, it was some kind of 80s, a big, great 80s, horror movie. So
which is a classic to us, but they don't specify whether or not it's a classic,
Yeah, the only thing that the 60s Night of the Living Dead is the only one that they kind of consider like an older film, and I don't even know, they really don't even treat it as like an old film. It's kind of like, hey, here's one that we really love to watch all the time.
Yeah, and by then it's like at least 15 years old,
Yeah. But anyways, that was basically the comic that this is based upon. It like I said, it was way darker. There's the themes in it are way more mature than anything in the show. But there is a basis for how dark the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina actually was. It wasn't just based on like some random thing they came up with out of nowhere. I mean, they had a comic to kind of base it off of, and I do like some of the changes they did. I like the fact that Madam Satan in the show is based upon Lilith. I think that little bit of lore is better than having her just be some like weird, like this ex-lover to, Sabrina's dad. That's kind of, I thought that was kind of, lame that she was just an ex-lover and she had all that power on top of it. It was kind of weird, but.
Yeah, she has it makes way more sense in CAOS why she has her power, who she is, and how she became who she is. I mean, and she has ultimately like 3 characters at least in Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is all ties into one person, but it's amazing how they work it out.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But before we get into Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, you mentioned already, I think we should have an Attack of the Bees right about now.
Yeah, I think we should cue the music.
What is that? What is that? What is it? Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah! Open my eyes!
So in 1996, there was of all things, a Showtime film production of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Now, I didn't even know this thing existed. It was LlaReyna. LlaReyna was the one that informed me of this. It was apparently a pilot for the TV show that would come out later. and it was very much a Canadian film. There is only one actress that I can think of that I could find in any of the cast that was an American, and that was the primary actress, which is Melissa Joan Hart, who plays a character called Sabrina Sawyer in this, which is a big change from the actual TV show and the character at large. Sabrina's actress, Melissa Joan Hart's obviously known for Clarissa Explains It All. Like I said, anybody who grew up in the 80s and had Nickelodeon, I mean, they grew up with Clarissa. It was one of those shows that just everybody watched. She's also been in, I remember in this movie in the late 90s called Drive Me Crazy. It was one of those teen, comedy type movies, romance movies. And it's one of those weird ones where she's like, her and the guy that she's star-crossed lovers with are like one house over from each other, and they finally get together at the end of the film. It's one of those. And of course, she's now in like a bunch of Hallmark movies. Like, it seems like a lot of these people end up in Hallmark films later on in life.
And her Melissa and Joey series. She always end up with Joey. Oh God, what's his name? Joey
Lawrence.
Something. Lawrence, yes.
Yeah. Which he was off of Blossom, I believe, was the TV show he was off of originally.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of these other people that I'm not really familiar with. Primarily, I guess, because they were Canadian actors and actresses. Michelle Beaudoin played Marnie in the movie, which is Sabrina's best friend, and she's kind of a ditz and, kind of unpopular kid. They make her into a character called Jenny in the first season of the TV show, because she actually did go to the TV show along with Melissa Joan Hart, at least for the first season. And she was like kind of the bright, smart character in that. So I don't know. I mean, they changed her name and her character type. For horror fans, she was, at least in part, in the movie Ginger Snaps 2, which is a, pretty good. Ginger Snaps 1 and 2 is a pretty good series of werewolf films. Charlene Furnett played Aunt Hilda. In the TV show, she was played by Caroline Ray, and they couldn't be any different, really, because in this, like, it's actually Aunt Hilda who's the one who's coming up with all the suggestions on how to help Sabrina and all that. And I feel like in the TV show, and then also in CAOS later, it's more like Aunt Hilda's kind of like the fun aunt. And Zelda's the one that ends up being the one that, was like, well, you got to do this. Here's what, we got to take care of this problem. She's the one that's more of the mother, as it were. Sherry Miller played Aunt Zelda in this. She played in Stephen King's Kingdom Hospital. That was the one thing she might be known for to horror fans. Beth Broderick is the one who played her in the TV show, and that's the one that everybody knows of now, especially when we get to one of the episodes in the 4th season of CAOS. Tobias Meller played Harvey Kinkle. He was actually in several horror films after this. He was in Disturbing Behavior, Wishmaster 3, the Carrie remake that in 2002. He went on to do a lot of horror films, and Disturbing Behavior is one that a lot of people know of, the Katie Holmes movie. And then there's this random guy named Ryan Reynolds that played Seth. He didn't go on to do anything.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, just some goofy Canadian kid. Didn't do jack shit since this film. I
heard he was a total asshole, though.
Yeah, he was a complete jerk. Nobody wanted to work with him. This movie is just goofy as all get out. I mean, it really is. It's it's very 90s. I mean, it is 90s through and through. I mean, the outfits, the way the lingo that they use. I mean, I just felt like I was in a time capsule or in a time machine and just went back in time. I mean, it's totally 90s all the way through, and it's just one of those one of those teen romance movies. I mean, it's Sabrina's like coming into her own. It's one of those coming of age stories. She finds out that she's a witch, and she's getting these powers that she's manifesting upon her 16th birthday, and she's attracted to Seth, but she's also likes Harvey, so there's that little bit of a love triangle there that's in a lot of these movies, and it's
90s love movies.
It's just one of those. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's it's got all the the characters, the jocks, the geeky kids. I mean, it's got all the cliques in it. The weird thing is it's set in Riverdale. That's where the characters move to. They're not in Greendale like Sabrina, the whole, her whole history is set in Greendale. They're actually Riverdale High is where they go to in this, which they changed for the TV show later on, but I just thought that was interesting. And, of course, Salem has a different voice actor than he did in the TV show that would come later.
You answered a question. I was going to ask if he spoke.
Yeah, he does speak throughout the movie quite a bit, actually. He's not as snarky as he is in the actual TV show. He's not as condescending, I guess, but
Is he more sophisticated or?
yeah, and I don't know, he's got more of a it's more of a feel good movie, and he's more like, the just like you said, that, kind of how you felt like he was more like a protector of Sabrina and that sort of thing. He's got more of that vibe going on.
Now, I'm looking at a picture real quick because you said Salem and, my ears perked up. He looks like a little fat lard in the photo. He's sitting on Sabrina's lap. Was he a little chunky in the movie or was he just a normal black cat?
No, he was a normal black cat. I didn't really notice anything different, but he was actual real cat. He wasn't the puppet cat that they end up getting for the TV show.
Love the puppet cat.
That definitely has a charm to it. And he has a weird history in this one. He was punished for kissing someone without their consent. Now, that's a weird reason to be turned into a cat for several hundred years, but whatever.
Yeah.
I guess those witches and their morality issues they had.
Well, they imply that he was trying to make somebody fall in love with him. I think he was trying to use his magic to make. So I don't know if that kiss was gonna put some kind of spell on them, but I know that's a major no-no in witchcraft. So
yeah, they have in the movie that like when she discovers she's got powers, she tries to make, I think, Seth fall in love with her, and when she tries a spell, it doesn't work, and that's whenever Aunt Hilda and Zelda tell her that the witches banned the use of love spells like so many years ago because it was an abuse of power. And I'm just like, they can do it.
Damn it, Salem.
They can do everything else, but that's the one thing that they have.
That's the major no-no.
Really, this movie is Melissa Joan Hart all the way. She's the draw of the movie. She's plays the innocent but likable main character. You can tell why she went on to have so much success later on in the TV show. I mean, she's the real reason, the real draw for the movie. But I personally have to say I fell asleep toward the end of this thing when I was watching it, and there was a combination of reasons for that, but whenever they get to the prom, it does kind of get a little bit, too teen comedy, type things. I had to go back and rewatch. That's whenever I realized that Sabrina turns like her arch rival into a poodle, and then there's a whole scene where Seth like becomes the douchebag.
Wait. You mean to tell me she turned her arch rival, which was probably being a bitch, into a bitch?
Exactly. Yeah. There's a whole scene where Seth turns into the big douchebag that you always assume. Like, he's the jock in this movie. So you sit there and you think, but he's being so nice to her the whole movie. It's like, is this going to be one of those weird ones where the jock's actually a nice guy? No. He gets her out in the middle of nowhere. He tries to put the moves on her, leaves her to out in the middle of nowhere. She blows up his car with her magic, and then
nice.
Well, not to kill him. It kind of just blows the tires up or something. But anyways,
yeah.
And then of course Harvey shows up out of nowhere, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to come save you," the White Knight type thing, and then
Captain Save-A-Ho.
Yeah, and then they go. She uses her magic to transport them back to the prom, and they have their dance together, and everybody's happy, and that's a happy ending.
I'm so glad I didn't watch this.
It's one of those movies. That's all it is.
Yeah.
On the Nicolas Cage rating scale, I'm giving this 1/2 of Valley Girl. Now, I did have to go back and watch Valley Girl after I watched this because there was something that was nagging on me whenever I was watching this, and I went back and watched Valley Girl. They are almost the same movie, set like a decade apart. Like the tropes are the same. They're the same kind of setup. You've got Valley Girl is as 80s as you can get. Like, the soundtrack is excellent. It's nothing but big hits from the time period. The characters are literally those Valley Girls. It's like, that everybody makes fun of now. It's like and the Valley Girl speech. The main character, she's torn between this douche of a jock character that she's been dating forever, and then she ends up meeting the punk that is Nicolas Cage, and she's attracted to him. So there's that love triangle. It's very similar. I mean, but I have to give it only half of this movie because Valley Girl is a much better made movie. The characters are better developed. Like I said, the soundtrack's excellent to it. I don't really remember any of the songs from the Sabrina movie at all. I mean, if there was any 90s music in there, it was the worst of the 90s. And I really think that there was a lot better acting and the story had more heart in Valley Girl, but they have very similar themes, so it gets a half of this. But Ryan Reynolds, and this is an interesting comparison between the two of them. Ryan Reynolds, who obviously, yes, has went on to do many, many things. He and Nicolas Cage both play very subdued versions of themselves, the people they would later become. Like, neither one of them are very outgoing in either movie. Nicolas Cage has got the edge because you get a little bit of the Nicolas Cage weirdo out of him. I mean, he does show a little bit of that. But Ryan Reynolds is basically just like background dressing. I mean, like if you didn't know that was him, I mean, like once you see his face, I mean, it triggers it. But like, he's just, I mean, there's just nothing to him in the Sabrina movie. Like, there's none of his humor comes through, that condescending humor that we love from him. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of weird. But anyways, it's
Look, I didn't even know about this movie until I started doing some research on the history of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, not even the series. And I'm like, wait, what? And Ryan Reynolds was in it? They don't mention it, okay? Obviously for a reason.
It was funny because I put this on and my wife didn't know anything about it, and she was she was watching it with me, and she was like, "Is that who I think that is?" I was like, "Yeah, it's Ryan Reynolds." And we both laughed to no end at his haircut. It is such a 90s haircut in that movie. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, he has the most 90s. That's the one thing I saw. He has the most 90s
got
haircut
like the
ever.
Frosted tips. It's parted in the middle. I mean, it's and I don't.
It's terrible.
But like I said, if I had to give it between the two of them, I mean, they definitely don't play the characters that we know of or the actors that we know now. I do have to give it to Nicolas Cage because there is a scene or two in that movie where he just chews through the scenes, and it's like, that's Nicolas Cage that everybody loves right there. He's breaking out. But anyways, that was the movie. It obviously led into the TV show in 96. Went on to be very successful for 7 years. And then we come to the new series, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And this show, I believe it was it 2017 when this one came out?
Oh, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina?
Yeah, I want to say 2017, but I could be wrong on that.
Hold on. I'm taking a look right now.
But anyways, and this series, our principal actors and actresses is Kieran.
2018, sorry.
2018.
October 2018. I was thinking 2018, but it feels like it's been longer, so.
Well, it's had enough time to kind of build up a little bit more, you would think, but I guess they have put them out fairly frequently, and the seasons are pretty short. The main actress that plays Sabrina Spellman / Sabrina Morningstar, and we'll get into that, is Kiernan Shipka of Mad Men fame. That's primarily what she's known for prior to this TV show. And I gotta say, I think she's a perfect pick for this Sabrina, at least, because she can play and look the innocent part, but when she wants to, turn on the devilish charm, if you want to say it that way, or the mischievous type look, she's got that in spades.
Yeah, she has it.
And I got these kind of ranked in order of what I prefer as far as the actors and actresses. I'm leaving some of these out because it's a TV show, ensemble cast. It's got a bunch of people. But definitely behind Sabrina, Michelle Gomez, who plays Madam Satan, is the number one pick in this show. Like, she is excellent in everything that she does in this. I don't know of anybody who would argue against that.
No, definitely.
Madam Satan, Lilith,
Madam Satan,
Mrs. Wardwell. Like you said, she plays like 3 or 4 different characters, and she plays them all differently. Like Mrs. Wardwell's kind of like the mousy type character. Madam Satan's like just out and about, like super sexual, super confident. Lilith is kind of an in-between character. I mean, she's got some of that, but she's also been battered and abused by Lucifer for so long. She's kind of got some of that, vulnerability to her.
Oh, definitely.
And she's primarily known before this, at least to me, for Doctor Who, because she did play the female version of the Master whenever I think it was Peter Capaldi came out with his version of the Doctor, and she was the best thing about that. I mean, Peter Capaldi was fine, and I liked some of his interpretation of the grumpy old man type Doctor, but it was Michelle Gomez who really stole the show when she was in scenes with him.
Now, I want to say about Michelle Gomez, totally kind of off topic, but you hear a name like Gomez and this little Latina over here's ears are gonna perk. And I'm like, okay, is she Latina? Michelle Gomez is actually, I think she's from Scotland.
Yeah, she's I don't know if it's the accent she's using in Doctor Who, but it's definitely either like Scottish or it's her natural I don't know, her natural accent is more like a British type accent. Like when she's speaking on Sabrina, it's like totally a put on American accent, but she does it great. I mean, I don't see one problem with it.
Yeah. And the name actually, her father is, I believe, of Portuguese descent. So,
yeah, that makes some sense.
Obviously. But I was like, Scottish? Are you serious? And I'm like, okay, that's amazing. So, moving on.
The next in order of people I really liked on this show was Chance Perdomo, who plays Ambrose. I love this
yes.
character. I love the actor, the way he chose to do that part. I mean, every scene that had Ambrose in it was a highlight to me.
Oh, definitely. Honestly, the show, yes, Sabrina, the main character, obviously, but the show was nothing without him.
He literally, and we'll get to that later, but if it wasn't for him in season 4, I don't know that I could have stayed with it, because it was Ambrose that saved the day most of the time, and not just in the story sense, but just in the sense of, like when he showed up on screen, he elevated it. Made it worth watching, above whatever nonsense was going on to the side.
Oh, yeah.
We have Miranda Otto, who plays Aunt Zelda, and I didn't realize this till I was doing research for this. She was in the Lord of the Rings movies, Part 2 and Part 3 specifically, the Two Towers and Return of the King, and she played. I'm going to lose nerd cred for this, but the horse people, the ones that rode the horses or whatever that they met, and their king was Wormtongue was like basically corrupting their king. She Emmeline, I think was her name. She played that character, and I did not realize it until I was reading this. I was like, oh yeah, she was in that. So she's actually been in some fairly big stuff. Other than that, horror fans might, know her. She was in a movie called I, Frankenstein, which I've not personally seen, but I have seen the next movie she was in that was a horror movie, and that was Annabelle Creation, and that is a damn good movie.
Oh my God, yes. My daughter's obsessed with that movie. My movie scares the living shit out of me. But who was she in that movie? Because I didn't do the research. I saw that. I was like, holy shit. And then I forgot to look.
Honestly, I didn't. I don't think she was a main character in it. I think she might have been like a secondary character or something like that. I don't think she was a main character. She was. It was toward the end of the movie, because I don't think, because what I remember that movie, she's not the main, like the family that's in the farm. She's not one of them. So, I could be wrong about that, and I'll probably regret that when we go back to review that movie later, which I know we will. But I saw that, and I'm like, that's cool that she was in that movie, because I think that movie's great.
I'm going to bring up one more thing, and I don't know if you remember this movie. I loved it. It was with Michelle Pfeiffer. It was a movie called What Lies Beneath. Did you ever see that one?
What Lies Beneath?
It's like a human, almost psychological horror, a little bit of ghostliness in it.
Was it Michelle Pfeiffer, and who was the big actor that was in that movie? It was a big name actor.
Why do I always draw a brain part? Because he's Indiana Jones.
Oh, Harrison Ford.
Here.
Okay.
Harrison Ford. Okay. Oh my God. Somebody slapped me.
Yeah.
I need to quit drinking before podcast. Yes, he was he was the main character.
Yeah, that's what I remember that movie. Actually, I have to say, I don't know that I've seen it all the way through. I remember scenes, because if I remember right, there was like some kind of scene where she was in a bathtub or something, and then the ghostly stuff going on. But I never really, I don't know, it never. At the time that I was watching it, I never really got into it. So it was one of those things.
That's a good movie for a future podcast, especially maybe for the ghost season.
I'm all up for it, because I'd like to go back and revisit it, because it does have serious horror cred. So there's nothing against it.
Oh yeah, Miranda Otto was in that movie. She played a pretty small role, but really an important role that kind of triggered everything that was happening around Michelle Pfeiffer's character. So I wanted to just add that as a
That's pretty cool.
Shout out.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Lucy Davis is our next actress in this, Anne Hilda, and anybody who's going to know her from Shaun of the Dead. She's put on some weight since the role in Shaun of the Dead, but she is one of the main characters in that movie. I mean, she's, one of Liz's, best friends. She's throughout the whole movie. She ends up taking a leg from her dead boyfriend toward the end of the movie and like beating a bunch of zombies with. I mean, it's a big scene. So I was delighted when I saw that she was in this from the get-go, because I was like, I know where she's from, because I watch that movie all the time.
Oh yeah.
Just the rest of the people that kind of rounds out some of the rest of the cast, and like I said, I'm not going into all of these. Tati Gabrielle plays Prudence. I thought she did a pretty good job. I kind of like the arc they did with her character. They took her from being, in the first few seasons, pure antagonist and kind of just a horrible person, to Sabrina, to being like one of her best allies and one of the friends of the family. Yeah. The biggest antagonist in the series, Richard Coyle, who plays Father Blackwood. He was actually in for horror fans. He was in a B movie called Grabbers from 2012, which is kind of like a weird monster type movie or whatever. So it's not well known, but I mean he was in that. Jazz Sinclair plays Rosalind Walker, who's Sabrina's best friend, and Ross Lynch plays Harvey Kinkle. And rounding out the immediate cast is Lachlan Watson, who was originally Susie, now Theo Putman. I list that one last, as we'll get into. It's not the actor's fault. Actor's fault. She or he did the best they could with.
They
did the best they could with what they were given, but it ended up being, I don't feel like that the show did them any favors as far as how they wrote the character, and that we'll get into that in a second. But that's one of my biggest pet peeves of this series.
One more character that I want to mention.
Okay.
Salem, the talking cat. That's it.
I'll give you that. The intro the intro scene for Salem is amazing. The little bit of darkness with like you said, there's like this weird tentacle thing they do to kind of hint that there might be more to him. You
know what? Let's just throw Salem Saberhagen. Okay, just the cat in general. He was a good character.
Yeah.
He deserves his shout out.
So getting into the show, some recaps of this season 1. It's a setup season. It's the world building. I thought it was well done. Obviously, it got us into the show. I mean, it had to have something.
Oh my God!
Going on.
Made me want to come back for more. Definitely.
I mean, it's a lot of one-off episodes. There's really nothing in the first season that I would say. Well, there is an overall arc, but it's not as defined as some of the later seasons. I mean, the overall arc is Sabrina is supposed to be coming into her witchhood. She has to sign the book of Satan. She kind of reneges on that. There's a whole issue with her and the actual witches, and how they put her on trial. And eventually, Madam Satan does end up coercing her or manipulating her into fulfilling her destiny by kind of tricking her into it. It's more like she basically does it to save the town, not realizing that the whole reason she had to save the town was because Madam Satan resurrected the I believe it was the Greendale 13, which were
yes.
Series, or they were 13 witches who were both turned. They were killed by the local townsfolk, but the local coven actually turned them over to the townsfolk to kind of get them off their back. So they've been betrayed by all sides. So whenever they come back,
and somewhat representative of the Salem witch trials or witch hunts, if you will.
Yeah, and so I mean that was basically the arc of the series, but I feel like more and more of it was just like one-off stuff. It was like it was establishing Sabrina and Harvey's relationship, kind of setting up Roz, setting up. Susie / Theo, kind of getting you into that. Ambrose is introduced, and I don't like him as much in this first season because they don't. I mean, you see the hints of what he would later become, but they kind of play. I mean, when at first he's a little. I mean, they kind of keep him, a little bit at hands or at arm's length or whatever, and don't really. I mean, he's got all these issues that he's working on, and he's kind of. But but they sow the seeds in this season for what he'll, the kind of character he becomes later. But I mean, that's generally what the first season is just setup. I mean, other than, her in the book and all that, but I don't really feel like it's not such a strong arc that I really felt like it dominated the first season in my mind enough to stand out.
Yeah, I will say that what made it such a good thing to stick or help the series in whole stick would be the darkness of it. It had some like decent, I don't know, sexuality to it without being overdone. It had some good spooks to it. I mean, the Greendale 13 was pretty good. I thought that was a really good storyline.
The interpretation they had of, I think, Lucifer at the time, like the horn and the hood devil that comes out. I mean, that was really, really well done. There was the setting, and this has been throughout the whole show, but it's established here. The lighting, the actual props and the sets, they're amazing. Like they made it totally feel like a lived in, like we said earlier, 80s type, town, where it's perpetually October. I mean, basically, anytime I'm watching this, it's like you get that October feel from it. It's
oh yeah, it's like Halloween every day.
Yeah, and that's basically what they bill it as. It's like Greendale is, Halloween every day. That's kind of the gist that you're getting. And then they just do, between just, the settings, like the little local comic book / milkshake shop that, one of the characters runs.
Cafe or,
just
diner. There we go.
Yeah, the diner. Yeah, all that stuff is just, they've done it so well that it's got that vibe and that setting that it just establishes the show. And of course, Sabrina's family's home. They really set that up well, and having the creepy mortuary in the basement, and I don't know, they just, they did a really good job on everything around the cast to kind of get you in the mood and the atmosphere that you need for the show.
Yeah, you know what? I just thought about, literally at this moment, something that kind of sets the timeline is that they have a wall phone. I just thought about that.
Oh, that is true. I don't know if
every time they answer the phone, it's the wall phone.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think I ever saw...
And you don't even think about that.
I don't think I ever saw a character in the show carry a cell phone. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think I ever saw that.
I don't think I saw that. One other thing I wanted to say about the set, too, and this is a whole topic that could carry off on its own, but the Baphomet statue that caused all kinds of fucking chaos for chaos.
It caused all kinds of real world chaos, and I guess we can get into that now and just to kind of discuss it. Basically, if you didn't know, the actual Satanic Church took offense to the fact that this is a copyrighted image. They copyrighted Baphomet like years ago, apparently, and when it was used in the TV show, I guess nobody knew that, and it's like the primary statue that's in the Witches Academy in the show. Like that when that first season's established, when they go in there, it's a big, monument or statue of Baphomet, and whenever the Satanic Church saw that, they were like, they just, cha-ching, dollar signs in their eyes. They're like, we got them now.
Yeah.
And they have to go out of their way in later seasons to kind of get rid of that, which we'll get into that in a second, but I think they did a good job with it, but I was kind of disappointed when they had to get rid of it. I thought it was really well done part of the set.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The only other thing I want to say about the first season, and I love these little things they add in that are like bits of lore and everything, was that there was one episode where Sabrina was put on trial for the fact that she did not complete the signing the book like she was supposed to and all that, and they get a mortal lawyer to come in and kind of defend her, and he went by the name of Daniel Webster, and that we've not discussed this all the way, but I really, really, really want you to, discuss with me the Devil and Daniel Webster later on.
Oh my God. I was like, why do I know what this is? But I can't think of it.
Yeah, it's based on a book. It's an older movie, but I actually think it's a fairly well done movie. It's Criterion Collection, for God's sakes. And whenever I saw that he was in that, whenever they mentioned Daniel Webster, I just perked up. I'm like, oh man, that is such good lore that they got, because he's literally, and they put it in the show and and all that. He's literally the only person who's beat the devil, and outside that guy in Georgia who played the fiddle for a while. So
I was about to say, what about Charlie Daniels? Okay, I know his name's Daniel, but we also had a Charlie Daniels. So.
Well, it wasn't him; it was Johnny, if you'll remember, and he was the best that's ever been.
Okay,
so.
Fine, Johnny Daniels. Whatever.
So, anyways, that little stuff I kind of geeked out over whenever they would like tie in little stories like that, but.
But if you think about it, Daniel Webster, he's literally a defender of the damned, which is fucking hilarious, because Sabrina technically wasn't the damned at that moment, but she was on her way.
Oh, yeah. There was, and she becomes it later on. But yeah, she was well on her way at that point. They did a kind of weird thing after this. They went away for a bit, but there was such a demand that they decided to go ahead and release another episode kind of midway between this and the quote-unquote second season.
We were not happy with that short first season. Like, we wanted more.
And so I'm labeling this one season 1.5. It's the special episode for the Christmas, quote-unquote episode called A Midwinter's Tale. And there's some fun things in this one. They did a really good job with it. I mean, the lore, like they bring in, like we've mentioned previously on some of our our Krampus podcast, they light the Yule log to keep away evil spirits. They get attacked by these. They actually get attacked by these kind of mischievous ghosts called the Yule Lads, and they're like their mother's this creature called Grilla, which I looked up and is actually like an Icelandic myth about this giantess, this female giant who eats mischievous children. So that's kind of a weird thing to bring into all this, and I didn't even know about. And
well, which is funny. I'm going to blow your mind even more. There is I think it was an article I read called Krampus and Friends. And granted, she's not, actually linked with Krampus. Like, she's never worked with him. Because it was called Krampus and Friends, it was basically should have been called Santa and Friends. But Grilla has been described as also another helper to Santa of sorts. So, just to tie in more to stuff we've talked about in the past.
Oh, that's great. I didn't know anything about that.
You're welcome.
But basically, just the episode is they've got these Yule lads they're trying to deal with. They're trying to convince Grilla, however you say it, to kind of take her boys and get the hell out. And she won't leave until because she senses she hears a crying baby, which ties into the previous season where I think Zelda took one of Father Blackwood's twins and kind of hid it away in their house, but they don't want to obviously give this child to this creature that's going to eat it, so they trick her and give her basically a glamored teddy bear that makes her think that it's a child. And the funny thing is they need her help later on, so even though they've tricked her, they've got to call her back, and that causes some issues. And
yeah,
and the other weird little side story they have in this episode is they got Susie. She's still Susie at this point, finds the mall Santa is trapping the souls of children in wax sculptures, and they've got to deal with that.
I remember that.
So
that was creepy.
It was a really well done episode. They kind of some of the same things that we liked about the Krampus movie. The way they lit it. It was mostly blue. I remember had that cold feeling. It's the only time in the series that they lose the October feeling, and they lose it specifically for this. And that's really the only one I'm aware of. But it was just really well done. The lore is kind of neat. So that was a little bit of to tide you over until the second season.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, CAOS Part 1, please join us for Part 2. Death Holler is brought to you by Blue Collar BS with your host, Reverend Dr. Death and LlaReyna. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share. We'll catch you next time. And don't forget to bring your death certificate.